Warning, the following audio transmission is based on theory and is intended for entertainment purposes only. It's Doomsday and its affiliates will not be held liable for anything your dumbass does. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, everybody, to It's Doomsday Podcast. Today is March 20th, 2022. Time is 15:08. Joining me tonight is codename Big Daddy Prep, a.k.a. Al.
How you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing great, buddy. And also joining us back for part 2 of the history of Russia-Ukraine is Michael Kee from the Real Conservative Podcast. What's up, buddy?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Real Conservative Talk Podcast.
There you go.
There we go.
My podcast isn't big enough for it to pop up as a suggestion when you type in Real Conservative. Okay? So you have to type in Real Conservative Talk.
Well,
It'll get
look,
there.
Michael, you picked 2 words there that are really researched. So, hey, listen, Hey, yeah. You should have said zebra conservative or something like that, and you would have just, wham, you'd been right up there,
I don't know how many people research zebra and conservative in the same.
Hey, but if they had them, you would have popped up number 1, brother.
It's true. That is very true.
Good.
It's good. It is good logic. So, guys, what we're going to do is we're going to pick up where we left off last week with Russia-Ukraine history, part 2, and we're going to try to get it all wrapped up in this episode because it's getting to the point where we are just beating a horse. We're beating a dead horse with this Russia-Ukraine stuff, and I definitely want to step away from it after this episode and get back into the prepping stuff. But before you guys lose your train of thought that are our listeners out there, just want to throw out the new email. It's doomsdaypodcast@gmail.com. You could find me on TikTok at It's Doomsday Podcast 2.0. You can find me on Clapper at It's Doomsday Podcast. You could find Al over on TikTok at big_daddy_prep. And you could find Michael over on TikTok at RC_talk.
Yep.
All right. So now that we got that out of the way, wherever you guys want to jump into this, feel free to. I really wanted to get into the biolab stuff.
Yeah, Michael's he's the one that knows about the biolabs things, and he can definitely give you a history that me and you could ever think of, Jester.
I will say, I want to go back to what you said about, beating a dead horse on this Russia-Ukraine thing. I think it's actually very important for people to listen and understand the actual history, because you're getting 2 different extreme sides of the story if you are in Russia or in China, or as opposed to being in Western Europe or in the United States. And it's a very gray area. It's not black and white like the media presents it. And then going into the biolabs, it's definitely not black and white. It's very I don't know where you want me to start with this, Jester. We can start kind of going into, some of the stuff I wrote about and have talked about on my show, on how this biolab thing has gotten to where it is.
Well, before you get into that, to go back to this beating the dead horse comment, what I meant by that is I know a lot of people come into this channel for the prepper content, the gun talk, a little bit of the conspiracy stuff and survival talk. To our listeners out there, I just didn't want to keep you guys on this too long, although Michael is right. Understanding this and getting the history of this is very important. There's a lot of people out there that are walking around with blinders on that are backing everything that our government's doing with this Russia-Ukraine thing. And I think when we start getting into the biolab side of this, it kind of paints a little bit different of a picture. At least it did for me anyway. Mm-hmm. And, I'm not saying I'm Team Russia, but I'm also definitely not Team Ukraine either.
Right. Jester, let me say this to all the listeners out there that listen to us every week that are preppers. If you're a prepper, you need to know why you're prepping. This is one of the reasons why you're prepping. The things that happen, the turmoil that happens as a result of what's going on across the seas over there. Also, if you're a planner, if you're a gun enthusiast, if you're a homesteader, all these things affect you. They affect your fuel, your food. I heard more people this year saying they're going to make a garden and have a garden and grow a garden than I've ever heard before, because people are scared of how this is going to affect their economy and their life, their way of living. So Russia, Ukraine has a any conflict in the world has a huge bearing on the way our society runs. So it is a dead horse because the mainstream media wants to continue to give you a narrative that they want you to believe. But doing your research and finding out the things that really happen in this conflict before, present, and in the future, it's paramount in you understanding what's going on in the world, so you know how to prepare, you know how to plan, you know what to do, how the economy affects you, and how it's going to affect you. So it's very important to our listeners. I'll get off my soapbox with that one, but this affects everything that has to do with everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you guys noticed. I know. Well, I don't think you guys are. I know Jester's not really on Facebook, but I am. And one thing I noticed is there's the fundraisers that Facebook allows people to operate, and a lot of them are, trying to raise money for Ukraine. When you see how many fundraisers there are and the amounts of money that these are bringing in, it does make you question how profitable this situation really is. We know about the military industrial complex. We know what they will do to, make money. That's nothing new, but how is this profiting people, or how are people profiting from this in other ways? How do we know, where's the accounting on where that money is going from these fundraisers? Where's
Michael,
good?
do you remember back during 9/11 when there were all kinds, everyone was torn about 9/11, but there was this huge outpouring of, every time you turn around, there was T-shirts about 9/11 and spirit. How many people made money off of a tragic event of 9/11 that didn't give any of it to the causes that really had to do with the people of 9/11? They just simply mined money out of what happened on 9/11. This is a similar situation. People are mining money out of what's going on in Ukraine. Those folks that are in the military industrial complex, in the government, and then all kinds of people off to the side, they're just crooks and criminals.
Absolutely.
I agree with you on that one. It's really hard for me to depict where the money could be going. But how you brought up the 9/11 thing, I don't know how many songwriters utilized different things about 9/11 over the years, and they were making a profit off that.
Right.
So this could be just another one of those things. But I don't know, guys. We could jump off into this at any point you want. I mean, I don't.
So I have, so much documentation here we can go through. I mean, what do you want to know about the biolabs?
Well,
Hey preppers, do you want 10% off survival food? Go to www.readywise.com and use code DOOM10 at checkout for 10% off all your survival food needs. Again, that's code DOOM10 at checkout at readywise.com, DOOM10 for 10% off at readywise.com.
let me ask a question to you, to Michael, because I know Jester usually he knows pretty much what your information is, but I don't. And what I want to know, Michael, is what's today's Ukraine and the biolabs that they're finding today? What caused those labs to be there today? Because a lot of people are like, I can't believe that we support labs in Ukraine. I'm like, hold on a minute now. Those labs were there for a long time, but now how did our money get there? So kind of get us in the
Good
last
question.
10 years. What
Okay,
happened to get
so
us
it goes back further than 10 years. Okay. The reason I say it goes back further than 10 years is because you've had a few different pieces of legislation that have come into play. Well, you have two pieces of legislation really, and one agreement. It's not really legislation. It was a deal that was brokered between Obama and Richard Lugar and Ukraine. But in 1992, so following the fall of the Soviet Union, you now had however many individual states, right, that were under the Soviet rule. all of these states were communist states. And overnight, they turned into a free market society. And what people don't realize in Russia never in their 1,000-year history, or however long they've been around, has never, ever had democracy.
Right.
All right. They don't even know what democracy is. Well, they may now, but not at that point in time. The same goes for a lot of these former Soviet states as well. And when you have such a drastic change in an economic system where everything went from being run and owned and operated by the government to now being privatized, well, you have at that point your elites that are going to come in and start taking advantage. They're going to start buying up what used to be public property, and they're privatizing it. And the regular everyday person is, it's creating an economic gap that is just extremely wide, much wider than what we always talk about here in the United States. So our politicians looked at, okay, well, there's instability in these regions. These regions also hold a substantial amount of nuclear and biological weapons that the Soviet Union had transported to there. And, Ukraine, I mean, how many, Chernobyl, you have the one that just got bombed. I can't remember the name of the other nuclear power. It's the largest one in Europe. So you have all of this stuff in, these dangerous programs that are still, these states are still operating. And the last thing the United States wanted was unstable regions being able to have this kind of weaponry. So the bill in 1992, it is the Freedom Support Act of 1992, and part of that bill focused on the non-proliferation and disarmament programs and activities. And it basically said that any of these states that participated in the proliferation of nuclear and biological weapons would not get any kind of funding and aid from the United States. And these economies were terrible. Like, you had inflation was through the roof. I mean, people were starving. All of these social welfare programs, like, let's say, a Social Security. Imagine every elderly person in the United States losing their Social Security overnight.
Right.
This is the kind of stuff they're dealing with. So they needed that aid. They needed that money, and they also needed help transforming into that free market society. And then a lot of these needed help, going into a democracy. So we were willing to fund the aid, send them money, but they could not take part in the proliferation of these weapons programs. Now, what another part of that same legislation, though, said that these former states had to allow for the expansion of United States business in those regions. So it was focused on bringing corporations and business opportunities, from the U.S. over to Ukraine and getting into these markets, not just Ukraine, but all the other states too, into these markets that were new and upcoming. They weren't regulated. They weren't. It's just untapped, right? And the first people that knew anything about it are our politicians.
Right.
And I'll send Jester the links to this stuff too, so he can put it on the show so people can realize this. But they had to follow all of these restrictions that the United States had placed on them to get money. They needed money, and the United States and our politicians basically looked at it like, this is a substantial opportunity for us to go and make crazy amount of money by pushing our U.S. businesses in this region. Now, you may be saying, well, they only receive money if they stop these programs. That's an important thing. In 2005, Richard Lugar, who's a senator, he also is the one that did all of the nuclear reduction bills and bio weapon reduction bills and all that stuff in the early 90s. Him and Barack Obama, only a few months after Obama became senator, went over to Ukraine. and brokered an agreement with Ukraine saying that we will provide you, I believe is around $15 million, something like that, in aid. But these programs, these bioweapon programs and these biolabs you have over here, you don't have to shut them down. You can keep operating them, but it's going to be a partnership between the United States and Ukraine. And the Department of Defense and the Health Ministry of Ukraine are going to collaborate and share information about all of the research that takes part in these labs. Another definition I want to provide, what is the definition of proliferation? It means the rapid growth of something. Or if you want to say it in biological terms, it means the rapid reproduction of a cell or an organism.
Right.
Rapid is the key word. Every definition of proliferation means rapid. It doesn't mean, so when you see these, weapons non-proliferation or weapon proliferation agreement, it's focused at, stopping the rapid growth of these weapons. But they still are creating these weapons. It's not, it's just saying that, hey, the Soviet Union can't go and make 30,000 nukes, in a matter of 2 years like they did in the Cold War.
Right.
They can keep building nukes. We just can't go overboard with it.
Right.
That's all that is. So go ahead.
So basically, it's sort of like the Ukrainians and the Ukrainian government. They were like a diabetic dropped inside of a candy store. They really shouldn't be messing with eating the candy, the government's money and everything, but that's all there was to eat. So that's what I ate, and now I'm sick. That's what happened to them, basically, correct? I mean,
Exactly,
they took our money, they took our influence, and before it was over with, they had basically sold out to us, i.e. us being a proxy state to do what we wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
But they had no choice at the point because they were already involved at that point.
Exactly.
Okay.
And where does Russia come in on this is Russia's looking at this, and Putin is in power. Putin came in power in 2000, okay?
Yeah.
From 2000 to 2007, in Putin's first term there, he didn't do any kind of foreign policy that would have been bad for the United States. We went over this last time. He has to join NATO. He has to join the European Union.
Yep.
He has for a lot of that stuff. But he's also looking at Ukraine and some of these other former Soviet states and seeing that the U.S. is getting heavily involved.
Right.
And he's thinking to himself, NATO is not a partnership. NATO is basically U.S. conquered territories. They do what the U.S. wants to do. There's no doubt about it. We know this. And he didn't want these border states to Russia falling into that same deal. He also probably was well aware of that 2005 agreement. And in that agreement, it also says that all the information that in research and data that comes up from these biolabs is confidential information that will be exchanged between the Health Ministry of Ukraine and the U.S. Department of Defense and should not be released to the public at all. The next year, or really the same year, 2005, a bill was introduced in Congress called the Nunn-Lugar Cooperative Threat Reduction Act of 2007 is really what I think when it passed. And that act went and repealed all of the restrictions around biological weapons programs and biological labs in these former Soviet states. It now allowed them to still receive money and aid from the United States, and they could go and do research in these biolabs. It basically got rid of that provision in the 1992 Act. So, about that same time, what you start seeing is you can go on to it's sam.gov. You can get access. You got to, just go through all the steps. I ended up getting access. You start seeing government contracts that are given out to U.S. private businesses like Metabiota, CH2M, Black and Veatch, to go and start building these biolabs and doing research in the biolabs in Ukraine and Georgia. So basically, the two pieces of legislation that were done in 2005 to 2007, it just allowed this enormous business opportunity to take place in the form of, bioscience, whatever you want to call it, in these former Soviet states.
Let me ask you a question, Michael. Do you think that if Congress had not been pre-warned to what was taking place in Ukraine as far as the business opportunities and the opportunities to basically do wrong? Okay, let's just face it. They were doing wrong and they knew they could. If Congress hadn't known about this and they wouldn't have the opportunity to have leaked it to their friends and people in elite business and things like that, do you think this would have happened the way it did? I mean, I kind of got my feelings that they had their fingers in the pie for a long time in Washington, and they saw, and a lot of them made.
Well, that's exactly what happened. Here's the thing: you can't even. Oh, I didn't. You're in the Matrix.
Of money for themselves. Yeah.
You're in the Matrix there. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought you were done talking, but I didn't catch that back part.
No, I was done. Done. Go ahead. No, I was just saying that they wouldn't have made the money that they made. I mean, they wouldn't have been able to have profited the way they did and got away with the things that they did in Ukraine if Washington and the Congress hadn't known ahead of time so they could tip off.
Well, the problem is there's no scenario that works because Congress is the ones that know everything, because you're talking about the Soviet Union, right? In a Cold War. We had so much legislation and agreements that were brokered in Congress and by presidents since since 1949. They're the ones that caused ended up causing basically the fall of the Soviet Union. And I'm just kind of generalizing it. They were involved the entire way. That's the thing. They're the only ones that did know about it. There was no way for them not to know about it because they're the ones that put the legislation in place to allow for the opportunities, in these regions to be taken advantage of by U.S. businesses. That was allowed by legislation passed by Congress. So there's really no situation where they wouldn't have known.
The perception is publicly, and that is dirty, and that a lot of them got rich off the back of things like Ukraine, Afghanistan, Iraq, special deals that they were able to have foreknowledge of things and pass it on to their friends, and themselves made money on too. So I just kind of confirms what I've always thought, and what most people out there in the world think here in the U.S. Everybody thinks everybody in Washington is dirty, and for the most part, they've been proven to be in the past. So I was just wanting your opinion on that.
Yeah,
so.
Ukraine and some of these other states, because Georgia's another one. By the way, Georgia was invaded by Putin earlier, a few years ago, right?
Yes.
So this isn't the first time this has really happened. Now, it hasn't gone down as big of a deal as what it is right now. But how much do the biolabs play into this conflict? Well, it's a good propaganda tool for Russia, especially after COVID and everything that happened with COVID. Was it really a national security threat for Russia? I don't see it. I don't know, because from our point of view, would NATO have ever just started shooting off nuclear or biological weapons at Russia for no reason? No, absolutely not. But we look at Russia like, well, they may use this against us. Russia looks the same way at us. They don't know what NATO's trying to do and what their intentions are.
Correct. I agree with you.
So there's two sides of the conflict. The other thing is, would you want Russia making or funding biological research after a pandemic in Cuba or in Mexico and housing missiles and soldiers and all that like we would if Ukraine joined NATO. Hell no.
No, you're right. You're right.
But I will say this, because it gets deeper with these biolabs. The biolab thing to me is not so much a driving reason in the Ukraine war, but it is something that people in the United States really need to pay attention to, because it exposes a lot of our current politicians all the way up to the top with our president.
Right. Yeah, there's no left-right. The left-right paradigm is dead. I mean, we all know now that the left and the right both are just the wings of the same bird, and
Yep.
most of the bird is corrupt. Okay, the very few that aren't corrupt will become that way sooner or later. It's just a matter of time. But the biolabs, they worry me to death. What really worries me is the weapons that we're using. Because let's face it, we've had all kind of incidents happen in the last week or so where accidentally a drone crashed here, accidentally this happened. But Putin said the other day that he considered anything that we, the Western world, NATO and the U.S., weapon wise, bring into Ukraine for assistance, he considers that to be, well, I mean, aiding the enemy to him, and he considers those to be targets. And that's what worries me, because here's the thing: we want to fight over what we see and what we see happening there, but we're not getting involved, which I don't think we should be. Frankly, militarily, our military should not be there fighting this war, but we're giving assets and we're giving money and we're giving huge amounts of financial aid to Ukraine. But now Putin's put his foot down and said, hold on a minute, that right there, I'm not going to allow that. So I can't really blame him there. The rest of the world seems to be aiding Ukraine in this fight, and it's kind of like him against all of us. So
Yeah.
I'd like to know what you think about that, because you've studied a lot about Ukraine, you studied a lot about Russia, you know about this conflict. Where is this going in the long run? Is what I want to know.
As far as where it's going in the long run is all speculation. I've been under the impression, and I know I've talked to Jester about this before. I think that Putin is now in a situation where he can't settle for anything less than 100% of his demands.
I agree.
Because too many Russian soldiers have died, regardless of whatever the estimates are. I've seen the U.S. estimates and the Ukraine's estimates are far higher than what the Russians are reporting.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at videos, the Russians aren't the ones that are collecting their dead soldiers. The Ukrainians are the ones collecting the dead soldiers. And I saw an article today saying that they were exchanging dead Russian soldiers for Ukrainian POWs.
Yeah.
So Russia probably doesn't even know I'm sure they have an idea. They're just not reporting what their total death toll is, but it's in the thousands. More Russian soldiers have died so far, no matter what are we on, 20-something days now?
We're getting close to 4 weeks. I mean, we're getting real there. I think he took over wasn't it a Sunday or a Monday, something like that, when he first invaded. So we're getting close to 4 weeks.
Yeah, and so I want to say estimates are probably between 10 and 15,000 dead Russian soldiers. There's more Russian soldiers died in 4 weeks than we had die. Sorry, 3 times more Russian soldiers have died in a matter of 4 weeks than we had died in 20 years fighting wars in Afghanistan and Iraq combined.
Wow.
So something to throw out there to you guys. It was February 24th, 2022. So we're coming up on a month.
Yeah.
Yep. Real close
so far.
Real close to it. Well, the thing that really worries me the most is I understand what I think Putin's doing. I'm sure the rest of the world has their idea what it is, but I wonder how far are we going to go? How much further are we going to stick our foot in the door of this situation? We've given a ton of aid. I mean, financial aid. What's it, close to $16 billion now we've given, or we're giving, along with all the weaponry. But see, Putin made a statement yesterday. I understand. It was like Friday, I believe it was, but he didn't want to allow the former Soviet technology when it came to ground-to-air missile type technology to be given back, because these former Soviet states still have these things in their in their stockpile weaponry. They're wanting to give it to Ukraine, and he's not with that. He's not seeing that at all. That's what worries me, is we're getting down to brass tacks here, where he's making this is what I'm not going to allow, and we're going to continue on doing things. So that's what worries me. Somebody's going to push the wrong button sooner or later, and it doesn't have to be a button on a panel. It could be a button with somebody. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we're walking a thin line. We really are. And,
Very.
I'm glad that Biden has had the sense to not go on and employ a no-fly zone, right? Like
I agree.
It makes, as much as I don't like Biden or anyone in his administration, it gives you a little bit of a peace of mind that he is being cautious on some of the stuff he's doing. Now, a lot of people don't like that, and he's catching a lot of shit for it. Like saying, "Oh, you're not doing enough," and this from both sides.
Right.
But I've maintained the stance that we shouldn't be involved. I still maintain the stance we shouldn't be involved. I know a lot of people disagree with that, but if you want to find something good, in my opinion, that Biden and his administration has done, now leading up to this, because you could also argue he's a lot of the cause for this, which he is probably. But as far as after the invasion started, at least he's been cautious on what he's been doing. He's been hesitant on giving some aid. Now they are giving aid. But that could change. It could change as soon as maybe Russia starts using bioweapons. I heard something yesterday. Apparently some Ukrainian citizen came out and said that they physically saw white phosphorus being dropped on Ukrainian people. And if that is confirmed, I've seen reports saying that would be our line. That would be him crossing the line that we would end up taking action.
Well, so Michael, I wanted to bring something up to you too, and I know we had talked about this. I don't know if it was on your show or maybe I overheard you talking about it on your show. There was talks of, if any American citizens died or got injured within this conflict, we would get involved. And I know we have had some reporters die over there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, has this been confirmed? Is this just speculation? I mean, do you know anything?
No, that's been confirmed. Two or three. There's been 3 reporters die. I believe they all worked for Fox News.
Well,
or one may have been
doing anything about it.
Yeah, could be. Well, one of them may have been an independent reporter, but he was still American. But I think he had ties to Fox News, and then the other 2 were the cameramen. So I don't know if you watch Fox News even kind of later at nights, Jester, but he was on. He would actually run his own segment from Ukraine on Fox News in one of the later time slots. What was his name? It's Benjamin Hall, and he was severely hurt. I don't know if he got blown up or whatever, but his 2 crew people that were with him both died. Those were 2 of the 3, and then that other independent reporter, and then he was hurt. Now he's out of Ukraine now, so they got him out, but I don't know. I haven't gone and followed up on how bad he was hurt. They said he's all right now. But those are American citizens. But then yesterday or the day before, they came out and said that the first American citizen was killed in the war. And I'm like, well, we just had 3 reporters that were killed. So I don't think they're counting reporters in that toll because they're taking the risk to be there, which the other guy did too. But that's like their job, right? It's like, I don't know what the difference would really even be, but we're not going to do anything. If U.S. citizens are in there, I think you're going to hear them say, hey, we've been warning you to get out for over a month, 2 months. You're there at your own risk.
Well, I've got a story here that a story I just brought up. I just saw it a few minutes before we went on to start recording, and it's from the Daily Star. It's 3 American mercenaries with U.S. flags in backpack killed in Ukraine, Russia media is reporting. So this is unconfirmed reports from Russian media and claim that 3 American mercenaries were killed in the Kremlin-backed breakaway regions of the Ukraine, with soldiers said to have had a U.S. flag in their backpack. Now, these are not U.S. soldiers, but these are American citizens, even though they've gone over there probably fighting, because there's been a lot of people that have reported for duty over there, like they really had a duty being over there. That's what worries me.
So I think I know the story you're talking about. There was an interesting one that came out, and this is where the propaganda thing gets really interesting. And the reason why I think it's connected is because you said 3 of them were killed and they're mercenaries. I believe that Russia released those names, and they those 3 people are identified as National Guard soldiers, National Guard or Army Reserve soldiers.
Yeah.
They had gone and supposedly looked at a registry of U.S. soldiers that had been deployed to Ukraine in the last several years, came up with those 3 names, and those 3 people are actually still alive back here in the United States.
Wow. See how disinformation happens? I just happened to see it. I didn't even have a chance to read the whole story. I just started in on it before we came on. So disinformation's all over the place. You have to really do your research.
Well, and it makes you wonder what side is true, because the only article I seen, I hadn't seen it from the Russian side, but I did read an article where it was explaining that these 3 soldiers that were identified by Russian media as being killed are actually here in the United States and were safe. And they were saying that Russia probably went and looked at a registry of, a deployment over there to Ukraine in the last however many years and got those 3 names and put them down. Yeah. It makes you, I don't know those 3 people. Maybe they were over there. Who knows? But
no way of knowing.
I don't think that will be a cause for, I think any American that dies in the U.S., or not in the U.S., in Ukraine, will be escalated by Russia and not us. If Russia's killing them and seeing that there's Americans that are soldiers being killed, that may piss them off, thinking that we're interfering. But if I don't see the United States looking at it and saying, "Oh, I can't believe that he's killing Americans," because the Russians don't freaking know. They're not over there wearing American flags.
Right. I've also heard a report that they're getting substantial amounts of troops from other countries. Supposedly 17,000 Chechnyan fighters were heading to Ukraine to assist the Russians. 40,000 that Syria is supposed to be sending. 40,000 mercenaries they're sending. So Russia is definitely getting some assistance here. They're not fighting this war against all of us, the rest of the world, without any assistance. They've got other countries helping them. You got Belarus. You got Syria, that's definitely in the back pocket because of the fact that what Putin do a few years ago, he helped Assad, helped Syria when they had the problem they had there in their country.
Yep.
So they're not by themselves.
And the Syrians have been fighting urban warfare for how long?
For years.
So you have an experienced fighting force going into these cities. Now the Chechens is a funny one because I always see videos on there's YouTube shorts or on TikTok and stuff, and it's about these Chechens, and they look like badass dudes, right?
They do.
They're big guys. I think when they went in though, right when they went in, there was 500 of them when they first started making these videos, and they got wiped the fuck out immediately.
Well, I heard that first 150 or so Syrians that landed on the ground, I think 40 or 50% of them were in the hospital. The next day, they had already had a reaction to something, whether it be the water or whatever it was. When they got there, they were sick and in a medical unit the next day. So, he's getting assistance. He might not be getting the best of assistance. But,
So I just thought the Chechen thing was funny because they look like, God, I wouldn't want to be fighting them. And they went and Ukraine has been wiping the floor with them. And the Chechnya one's an interesting deal because Russia went in there and just, obliterated that place, and it makes you want, and that wasn't that long ago. It makes you wonder, why are they wanting to help the Russians?
It does. It definitely does. This is a whole war, not only a war of shells and bullets. This is a war of mainstream media narratives crossed with disinformation, crossed with it's just craziness. You have to do research. You have to look at things with open mind. You cannot just go what mainstream media tells you. They say Russia bad, Ukraine good. Okay, now you can't listen to that. You have to. We found out what happened when that was, Orange Man bad, Biden good 2 years ago. We found out what happened with that. So this is a situation we can't afford to lose out on this one.
Yeah.
This is not just an election. This could be World War III. This could be the end of all of us.
Yeah. You need to go back if you want good information. You need to go, if you're going to watch a YouTube video, make sure it's from prior to the invasion. When I say prior, like a few years prior to the invasion. Somewhere maybe around 2014 to 2017 information, because it wasn't as big of a deal and we were reporting on it a lot more realistically. There's a lot of John Mearsheimer's good. Vladimir Posner is a good source. They explain it in depth. I mean, Vladimir Posner, go look him up on YouTube. He'll tell you everything you need to know within a matter of 30 minutes. Everything. You'll understand the entire story. But if you're going to look up information, that's only been put out in the last month, good luck, because you're not going to get the real story.
Right.
But this goes back a long ways.
This is a very tangled web here. You know what I mean? The Ukraine-Russia thing is not as simple as good little Ukraine got invaded by big bad Russia. It's just not that simple, folks. I don't have the way to tell you. I mean, I can't make it any simpler. Now, you have to really get away from what Fox and CNN are telling you and actually hear what's really going on in the world. Because if you follow that, you'll give your whole paycheck to Ukraine tomorrow, and you'll be getting us in World War III. You really need to find out what's going on to the listener out there.
Yeah. Now, the people in Ukraine that are defending their home. Here's the thing: the majority of the Ukrainians, are fighting because they want to fight for their country and they love their country, right? It'd be no different than someone coming and invading us.
Right.
Could it have been caused by our politicians? Yeah, but we wouldn't be worrying about that at that point in time. We'd be focused on whooping ass and getting people out of here and getting back to normal.
Right.
And that's where Ukraine's at. So, my support, I'm 100% behind the people of Ukraine, 100%. But I'm also well aware that the United States has caused a lot of this, a substantial portion of this. Russia can be viewed as, at fault for some of it. Ukraine plays a role in all of this. And it's unfortunately, it's the people of Ukraine that are having to deal with the consequences.
I agree.
Hey preppers, do you want 10% off survival food? Go to www.readywise.com and use code DOOM10 at checkout for 10% off all your survival food needs. Again, that's code DOOM10 at checkout at readywise.com, DOOM10 for 10% off at readywise.com.
Jester, we ain't heard from you in a minute. Are you still awake back there?
I just have so much knowledge on all these topics. I'm just saving it till the very, very end.
I don't blame you. Hey, save your load for the end. Yeah.
No, I still, so something to me is, as we talked about at the beginning, a lot of people are feeling this, right? Something I wanted to throw out there in the beginning of this out when you were talking about people buying up seeds and doing the gardens, things like that. I just wanted to point out to everybody that I've been getting reports from people that Augusta Farms, the meals they sell at Walmart, went up by 25%. They're now at $25 a kit now, from 20 to 25. Mm-hmm. So there are people feeling this now. To get into, this being for Ukraine or not being for Ukraine, I think our government is heavily tied in this, and I think that's the only reason we're over there in the first place. And I'm just waiting for a big bombshell to be dropped that they can't cover up. That shows our deep involvement with this, of why we're over there, what's going on, why they're silencing certain areas, things like that.
So I can get deeper if you want on this biolab deal.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, all right, I think you knew this. I submitted that article I wrote, 4 days ago now. And for the first 2 days, I had published it on Reddit and a few threads on Reddit. And everywhere I published it, they said, oh, look, it's Russian disinformation, at its finest, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting there, I'm like,
Michael, real quick on that. I want to say something, because I tried looking up the biolab thing to say what was going on. And Google and certain other outlets, search engines, are trying to portray this as QAnon shit that is starting to grow. It like it grew from QAnon. But continue.
Yeah, that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah, well, they're look, when the title of my article says evidence links Hunter Biden and U.S. government officials to biological labs in Ukraine. I put a picture of Hunter Biden as the picture like that is supposed to show up when I share the article, like the Facebook or Twitter or whatever. When I share it to Facebook, they will not allow the picture of Hunter Biden to be shown. Everywhere else does, but Facebook keeps changing it. Now they allowed the article, and I've gotten, gosh, I mean, it's been shared over 1,000 times now. But 2 days before, it was all Russian disinformation. I'm sitting there, I'm like, what do you mean it's Russian disinformation? All of my links, all of my resources that I've gained the evidence from are all from the United States government-run websites. I don't have one link tied to another, BS article or any kind of Russian speculation. It's all, I posted the PDFs to the actual agreements, the bills, explained them in depth. I put the exact government contracts that were given out, showing this stuff is true. I've posted the actual bank statements from hedge funds paying Hunter Biden, everything. And I'm thinking, I'm like, we have people that say everyone agrees, both sides. The mainstream media lies. Everyone does. Either it's Fox News lying to the liberals or vice versa, right? Everyone in this country agrees that the mainstream media will twist the narrative to go with their agenda. But but then a lot of these sites, when you try and, post information and provide evidence, they only want links to what they call credible sources. And these credible sources are the mainstream media websites that they always bitch and complain is lying to them. And when an independent site comes in there with actual evidence, actual sources, like I don't use the term per anonymous sources like these, MSM sites do. Like any source I have is legitimate. They say, no, it's misinformation. It's disinformation. I'm like, misinformation means it's wrong information. It doesn't matter who freaking writes the article, what country writes the article or puts it out. If it's actually true, it's true. Who cares who wrote it, right?
Michael, I remember a time, you're younger than me, but I remember a time back in America when you wrote an article, and if it wasn't right, nobody listened to it, nobody read it. But if they read it, they say, oh, well, hold on a minute now, that doesn't follow our narrative, so, it's got to be misinformation. At one time, there were actual real journalists out there. That's what the people in the non-mainstream media are trying to do. Mainstream media journalists they don't write articles. All they do is report what they're told to report.
I have learned more factual information from blogs than I have the mainstream media lately.
Yep, I agree.
And the reason I brought that up, though, is because 2 days later, what comes out? Oh, the New York Times confirms the Hunter Biden laptop is real.
Yeah,
I was just going to bring that up.
Only 2 years after everybody else did. Yeah, after non-mainstream media.
And I'm sitting here like, well, hell, here I am. I just got accused of spreading Russian propaganda, right? Even though I had all the evidence. And, oh, wait, you mean even the New York Times is saying this laptop's real?
Yeah.
And so let me dig into this Hunter Biden deal. Hunter Biden, Devon Archer, who worked as a senior campaign advisor for John Kerry in 2004, and Christopher Hines, who is John Kerry's stepson, three-way founded a investment fund called Rosemont Seneca.
Yep.
Rosemont Seneca, on their website back in, I believe it's 2014, which, by the way, it's shut down now, I think, posted on their website that they financially backed companies, the companies Metabiota, CH2M, and Black & Veatch. Do you remember where I said those companies' involvement was? They're the ones that are involved with the biolabs in Ukraine.
Yep.
I also saw a CNN article from, it must have been back during the election 2020, that was fact-checking the claim that Hunter Biden received $3.5 million from Rosemont Seneca and Devon Archer in payments. In my article, I found the actual statements, which Devon Archer's Rosemont Seneca account was held with Morgan Stanley. I believe it was Morgan Stanley. I have it here. Hold on. Is either, let me see. It is Morgan Stanley, yes. And it's this PDF is over 260 pages long, and it's every month's statement between the years 2014 to 2016. Every month, there are multiple transactions between $5,000 to $50,000 a piece paying Hunter Biden. It's literally listed on the freaking statements. And I work in the investment industry and very close. Like, I do most of my job is analyzing people's statements and bringing money over from other firms, right? Like, I know how to read these things very well. These are legitimate statements showing these transactions. Like, look, okay, I'll give you an example. Let's see.
So I just want to throw something out there real quick, guys. We're about at our time frame. Do we want to make this a part 3 and pick it back up next week?
I would say so.
Yeah, I mean, because there's more information out there that people need to get, and I just want to know one. I just want to answer one question. Maybe Michael, maybe you can tell me this next week. How between Rosemont Seneca and Burisma and the hookers and the dope, did he have any time to sleep? Is what I want to know, because I've been working my whole life and I ain't got that kind of energy, but I guess the dope must help you, because there's so much money that this man has passed through his hands, and he has so much involvement in Ukraine, but yet we're sweeping all this under the carpet like it's nothing. I mean, the president of the United States, or the one you say he is, son, has his hands deeply in the place that happens to be ravaged by war right now. And leading up to this, he had a lot of involvement in companies and money that was transacting and things that were transacting that caused this war. How's that happen?
And that's where we're going to pick back up next week.
The answer to my question, Michael, you'll be number one next week. Okay, we're calling you first.
All right, I want to thank all you guys for joining us in on this podcast. And I was expecting us to do 3 parts, guys, but it looks like it's coming.
This is an emergency action message. At approximately 1 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, NORAD is tracking 15 ICBM nuclear missiles inbound to the following cities: Orlando, Miami, Pittsburgh, Dover, Newark, Richland, Philadelphia, New York City, Baltimore, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Boston, Seattle, Detroit. This is an extremely deadly situation. Stay tuned. The next emergency message will be a presidential address.